welcome back to the Unwritten Hour YouTube channel, the home of album reviews, discography guides and think pieces. Now today's review is another requested review, and this request comes from my good friend Mr. Cyndaquil42, who you may know as guest on an episode of the Not So Forensic Record Society in the past, and may go on again in the future, wink. But today, he asked me to cover the brand new Ouse album called Crying in Camo. And to give you a bit of background as to my history with Ouse, I think Cyndaquil recommended me one of his songs on his episode of the Not So Forensic Record Society, and I thought it was pretty good, if a little bland. So I went away and listened to some of his other stuff, and in all honesty, kind of liked it, because it kind of had the same vibe as kind of contemporary emo rap. And before I start again, I just want to clear up what my opinion towards emo rap is, because the amount of times I've slagged it off on this channel, I should probably clarify it. Like, I don't mind it when it's overdone, it's really cringy, but when it's just like somebody singing over a good tune, you know, maybe some heartfelt lyrics here and there, I don't mind it. You know, whether you're talking about Juice WRLD or maybe even Tierra Whack or Joji or Kudeka maybe is another example, I don't mind it, it's perfectly fine. And to me, Ouse seemed like he could do all that and then some, so I was definitely excited to see what he could offer up on this new album. Although, that said, the fact that this album is 16 tracks long did worry me, because normally whenever an album goes over like 14-15 tracks, I start to get a bit worried. But all that aside, I sat down and gave it my best shot, so here now is what I think of Ouse's brand new album, Crying in Camo. Track 1 is Intro, and as you all know, I am a notorious intro, outro, interlude hater, and that is still the case here, because this one, if anything, is even more annoying. Like, yeah, sure, it's annoying when they don't put in effort like Coldplay do and they just have some random 40 seconds of ambient noise, like, that is annoying. But what's even more annoying is when they do something good but don't bother to finish it. Case in point, this. You had a really good vocal melody going, and then when the vocoders came in, it was like, oh yes, keep going, that is good, I want more of this. But then it just stops after like 2 bars of him singing with the vocoders on, and I'm like, no, put a beat in, do something, switch up the melody a bit. But no, it just stops dead after 35 seconds. Like, what was the point of it? If you're going to do something, at least extend it out for like a period of time that would warrant listening to it. Because like, I want to like this, but I can't because it's 35 seconds long, so like, what's the point of it? The second track is called Demons, featuring Lund and Promoting Sounds, and I thought this was actually quite good because, for starters, the combination of the guitar and vocals in the intro, while being very typical of this style, are still done very well, because I think, A, the vocal melodies that he's singing are super catchy, like they're absolute earworms, but I also think the guitar complements it very well. But then, while the verse vocals are pretty good in my opinion, like they're very well delivered, quite catchy, very laid back, quite methodical, the vocals in my opinion really come into their own in the chorus when they're backed up with some really nice harmonies, and again, the earworm qualities of them is just like amplified tenfold on the chorus. But they are also backed up by quite an intriguing beat, which is sort of oddly industrial in a weird way. Like, a lot of the drums sound quite metallic, but not in a bad way either, and there's plenty of kind of variation within the beat throughout the kind of runtime of the song, that it doesn't get too boring. Like, that's to say though, the track does have its problems. Like, for starters, the guest verse from Lund, I just didn't personally like, given that, A, the kind of nasally tone of voice that he uses on his verse, and also the fact that there are some outwardly cringy lyrics on his verse, like, you left a hole in my heart, why, or something like that. Like, there's just those types of lyrics that I just hope I didn't have to hear throughout this whole album. To his credit, Ouse does not have any outwardly awful lyrics from what I could tell. I mean, there were a few that maybe made me squint a little bit, but not too much. But I'd say overall, you know, despite a couple of problems, this is actually a pretty good emo rap song. Like, it's a fairly generic emo rap song, all things considered, but it still is quite a good one. The third track is called Love Killer, and yet again has some very, like, obvious positives. For starters, it's another brilliant chorus. Just the earworm melody that Ouse is singing on this is really brilliant. And I think the way he switches from a more melodic delivery in the first verse to a more rap delivery in the second verse is actually a very nice contrast. And again, there's no outwardly terrible lyrics here, so he's doing a very good job on that front, I think. But there are a few things about this track that just make me scratch my head a little bit. I mean, for starters, the opening melody, although it does get improved in the chorus, despite being made a little more psychedelic and whirling. The actual opening melody is very kind of faint and watery, like it doesn't sound too good, like it just sounds a bit like lo-fi and grainy, and again watery, I'm not sure what the word is. And I think that in the intro, the kind of deepened backing vocals that Ouse uses in the intro, the kind of demon backing vocals if you like, I've never been a fan of that because it just sounds absolutely tacky. No matter how you do it, it's always going to sound tacky, and this is no exception. And I also think the beat could have been done a little bit better, just because the drums and the bass are so overpowering to the point where, like, you know, lay it back a bit and let the vocals really carry it. But like, I'm trying to listen to the vocals and they are good, but then all you can hear underneath it is just like and while the beat switch near the end is certainly cool, I guess, like it wasn't really necessary. Like you could have just ended it at 1:50 and it would have been a very short but enjoyable, like another fairly standard emo rap song, but a very enjoyable one. It's just that the beat switch kind of adds time on without really doing much of anything, so it just renders itself a little bit pointless. All that said though, this is still a very solid track despite its problems. Want Me Dead with Mitch Jones is next, and honestly, there's really not anything about this song that differentiates it from any other song in this style that you just say, oh, what's the most typical emo rap song possible, and you'd probably come out with something that sounds a little bit like this, because just that there's nothing here, just like fairly pleasant, clean guitar loop, like sort of catchy-ish but also really melodramatic vocals, underwhelming annoying feature, overblown beat where the drums aren't produced too well, lyrics on a failing relationship that are about as generic as like sliced bread. Like there's nothing here. Like at least with the last few tracks I could say that there were a few things where Ouse was definitely putting his own stamp on things, whether that be with his kind of catchy harmonising, or, you know, there's a few of the things that you could pick out and go, that is definably him. But with this, there is absolutely nothing. Like, again, the beat is not produced very well. The feature is unbelievably annoying, especially with the tone of voice he puts on it. It just grates my skull. Again, the beat is just really generic. Like, Ouse isn't really doing anything special. The lyrics are generic. Like, there's just absolutely nothing here. Track 5 is called Dilated Eyes, and is one that I ended up feeling pretty mixed on, because yes, while it is definitely definably Ouse's sound, it doesn't exactly work in every aspect of this song is what I'm saying. And let me explain myself, because I do actually quite like the beat on here. I do like how minimal and laid back, yet also kind of how glitchy and experimental it is in its presentation, and that I kind of like. And I also think that the vocals throughout the song, yet again, and this is playing to Ouse's strengths here, the vocals throughout this song are very catchy and again laid back, quite soothing, very kind of they're not too grandiose, but they are doing enough so that you actually have to draw your attention to them, which I think is definitely the MO of the good parts of this album. But that's not saying that this whole track is all good, because for starters, the vocal effects in the intro are really odd, because there is definitely a good melody there to what he's singing in the intro, and I think that's also used on the chorus as well, but I definitely do think it would have sounded better without the vocal effects. And to go back to the beat again, while I do quite like how kind of glitchy and experimental it is, one part of the beat that doesn't work for me is the kind of stabby synth bass that he puts underneath it. Like, I think it definitely would have been better with some more like kind of generic rap sub bass, because I think that just would have complemented the beat a lot better. I mean, I get that it's kind of trying to be glitchy and experimental, but I think you kind of need to lay back when that doesn't exactly benefit the track. You're like, there's no point being experimental if it's not going to help anything. And I also think some of the lyrics are kind of generic, and there are some lyrics that genuinely just make me cringe so hard, like the fuckboy line. I know some people might find it funny, but I'm sorry, I just can't get past it. And also the lo-fi piano outro, like the beat switch, is literally the definition of pointless. Like, it did not need to be here. Like, it happened on Love Killer and it was kind of meh. Here it is literally just pointless. So while there are definitely good aspects to this song, you know, I really like the vocal melodies throughout this song, and I also think the sort of experimental nature of the beat is very intriguing. There are also some things that it does that just make me scratch my head, because it's like you had good stuff here, but it's kind of like you went a bit too far overboard with it and thus kind of ruined it slightly in the process, I guess. track 6, Vertigo, kind of feels like a combination of the last two tracks in my opinion, because you've got some fairly catchy, decent vocals with some fairly generic lyrics, but they work fairly well within the context of the song. But then you combine those fairly decent vocals with a beat that just feels so experimental and slapdash in all the wrong ways. Like, I know I kind of had a slight problem with it on the last track, but here, all my problems with the beat on the last track are amplified by like 1,000, because the beat is kind of skittery and weird, and I get it's kind of going for a bit of an offbeat groove maybe, but that, combined with all the weird glitchy, watery, distorted melodies on top of it, just does not fit well at all. And again, this on top of Ouse's vocals, where he's doing something fairly decent, it just feels like a bit of a car crash, if I'm honest. Like, it would be alright, but the fact that the beat is so all over the place and so disorganised and kind of experimental in all the wrong ways is kind of where this track falls apart for me, because it could have been like a fairly decent, if very nondescript song, but it's because the beat feels the need to be so experimental and all over the place that it kind of loses me a bit. Like, it just feels very messy, if you get what I mean. Like, nothing about it seems to be, it's like he took like melodies and beats from like 6 different songs and just piled them onto each other and just kind of seed what the end result was, and it's not very good, all things considered.
Burning bridges ever since I made it solo. I know your business, I'm just trying to be alone right now. It's last dance in my polo. I wanna go home cause you're not answering your phone right now.
The next track is Too Many Problems featuring Palfu, and this is a track that I just feel very, very indifferent on, almost to a fault really, because the guitar and vocal melodies are kind of catchy-ish, I guess, but they really are doing absolutely nothing special. Like, these are easily some of the most low-impact vocals on this whole album. And the beat, while I would say it sounds pretty good with the organic bass and live drums here, I do think it seems a bit too punchy in context. Like, this is clearly a very mellow, laid-back, chilled-out track, and so to have these really punchy live drums and bass in the mix on the beat here is kind of a bit of an odd mismatch. And then you get onto Palfu's verse, it's just everything I don't like about the track that I heard from him also, because it's just like generic relationship lyrics, like bad, like, oh, my girlfriend left me, I'm so sad lyrics in like a whiny voice, just very, very irritating. And out of all the tracks on this album so far, I'll probably say this one is easily the most low impact. Like, it either does absolutely nothing and is so nondescript, like with Ouse's vocals and the beat, or it's just kind of annoying, like with Palfu's verse, and so it's easily just like the most nothing song here so far. Like, this song is about 3 minutes long, but it felt like I didn't even realise any time had passed before it had finished. Like, I was just so bored out of my mind. And the lyrics here about ADHD, apparently according to Syndiquil42, who does actually have ADHD, these lyrics apparently aren't exactly the best, so I'll probably just take his lead on that one. So yeah, overall, it's not exactly looking great.
Too many problems, heartbreak ain't even on. Yeah, I got too many of them, and I don't even know where to start.
At the halfway point, we get the track On My Mind, and in the first 20 seconds, at least lyrically, it sounds as though Ouse is trying to write like the most generic emo rap song of all time, like, I get high, I would die for you, I can't take this anymore, blah blah blah, on and on and on, stuff we heard like a million times before. Although, that's not to say that the track is all bad, because admittedly, the kind of sub-bass backed piano ballad idea is a very novel one, and one that I do think is done fairly well, and also I do think the vocals are quite catchy, especially the ones on the chorus, because they have a kind of understated melodic quality to them that I do quite like. Although even with this idea, I know that Ouse could do so much better with this. Like, it just seems, again, quite nondescript. Like, there are some good bits here, there are some bad bits here, so it just is like a very middle of the road song. Like, even with this idea, again, like I say, it could do so much better. Like, you give somebody a bass back piano ballad, and admittedly, this is nowhere near as bad as when Scarlord did it on that one album, which admittedly to this day does still make me feel a little bit sick, but he could have done so much better. Like, I don't want to start repeating myself, but like, there's a lot of wasted potential here, I think is what I'm trying to say. And yet again, the outro beat switch additional like instrumental thing is absolutely pointless, because he adds an extra 35 seconds on it for no reason at all by just having a track of him humming with some faint synths in the background. Like, I don't know if the phrase "let sleeping dogs lie" can apply to music, but like, if a song's finished, just leave it alone. We had it on Love Killer, and then on Dilated Eyes, I think, and then on this song as well. Like, just stop it. Like, if the song's finished, it's finished. Leave it alone.
Staying on my mind, you've been staying on my mind. hide all the fucking time. Break and make me lie.
Track 9 is If I Die featuring Garden, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and this track for all intents and purposes is pretty good. I didn't mind it too much actually, because for starters I think the combination of the vocals and the kind of odd distorted 8-bit melody that plays is at the very least an intriguing one, and I do think that while the lack of beat for the intro and the verse was a good idea on paper, because again if you're going for subtlety you do want to lay back a bit, like a bit of structural development with the melody itself maybe wouldn't have hurt here, although when the beat does come in, while it is a little bit overblown, because like I said, if you're doing a more subtle track you want to lay the drums back a bit, so maybe not make them so punchy as they are here, like it does give the track a very odd, swirling, psychedelic quality that lends to it quite well, I think. And for the first time on this album, I think the guest vocalist on this song isn't actually that bad. This is easily the best guest vocal appearance I'd say on this whole album, easily, because he's not doing it in an annoying nasally voice, and while the lyrics are fairly generic and sad, which is pretty much par for the course at this point, like it's certainly not the worst that's been done here so far, because it is at the very least tolerable. I'm not sure if that's a positive or a negative, but do with that what you will. So yeah, like this track overall, it's certainly not mind-blowing, and the lyrics themselves aren't exactly reinventing the wheel, but it's definitely pleasant and probably one of my favourites here if I had to be honest, because I think it's a track where it does the kind of experimental nature of it very, very well without kind of overstepping the line, and I think Ouse and his collaborator do a good job at kind of riding that line.
If I die in your arms, bring me home.
The next track, called Dreams of You, is very, very interesting, and one that I came out quite liking, because the combination of the really nice organic acoustic guitars and the sparkly grand pianos is a really nice one and creates a really quaint, nice kind of cavernous vibe, but not in the wrong way where like it's so overdone with echo that it makes you want to die. Like it does kind of have that quaint vibe, but it's also very spacious, very grand. And I also think the vocal harmonising that Ouse does on this song goes over very well, because he's shown a talent for vocal harmonising before, but like a quaint acoustic guitar piano ballad is the perfect place to do it, and it goes over very, very well here. Although, what I would say is that if you're going to do a song like this, while I do very much like this song, if you're going to do a song like this, you have to go all the way. Like, you have to really, really commit to it. So that is where I think that the addition of auto-tune and the weird plinky electronics that come in near the end kind of take away from that. Because if you're going to do a really organic, quaint, kind of folkish ballad, you really have to properly commit to it, and so the kind of addition of these more synthetic elements do take away from that a little bit, but nowhere near enough for me to say that I didn't like this song, because all things considered, I still really, really like it.
I woke up shaking with tears still in my eyes, waiting for something.
The next track is called Check My Phone, and is one that I feel kind of conflicted on, because for starters, I do quite like the very subtle, almost garage-esque beat on this, which I do think sounds very cool, because it does that garage sound while still remaining quite laid back and kind of within the vibe of the song, if you see what I'm saying. And I do think the vocals on the chorus are very catchy, if a little kind of 2012 dance popish, which normally I wouldn't say is inherently a bad thing, but on this song it does maybe rub me a little bit of the wrong way, but I do think it equally kind of complements the song also in a weird way, so I'm not really kind of sure where I stand on that, although the rap flow in the verse I do think does work very, very well, and the lack of overtly questionable lyrics is definitely a good thing. Although then again, I do have my problem with this track. Like, for starters, the synths, especially in the chorus, do have a tendency to sound a little bit irritating, especially with how distorted they are in the chorus, again, like I say. And I also do think that this is another one of those tracks, kind of like previous ones, where it just suffers from feeling a little bit low impact. Like, the vocals to some degree do offset that, but I think for the most part this track just feels kind of like it's good to have on in the background, but that's it. Like, it's background music. There's not much about it that would warrant you like analysing it closely like I've done, but like, you know, there's like, it's pleasant, but that's basically it. Like, there's not a lot about this song beyond the kind of catchy vocals and the garage beat that draw me to it all too much. And seriously, man, enough with the beat switches, okay? Like, it was annoying on the last few tracks where you did it. This one is just pointless. Like, I'm pretty sure you've just taken the beat of the song, slowed it down and added a distortion effect over it, and then played that for 40 seconds. Why did you feel they needed to have an extra 40 seconds sections on the end of this song that is absolutely pointless. Like, this one is just stupid. Like, just stop it. Track number 12 is Water, and is yet another one that I feel kind of conflicted about, because I do definitely like the combination of the catchy vocals with these very melancholy pianos, and especially when the vocal harmonies come in a little bit later, they just help to add that extra layer to everything that makes it sound really, really nice. Although the problem is, for me, when you take that very cool, very catchy, laid back, melancholy bass that you've set for the song and then pair that with these really kind of thumping, almost metallic drums, it does definitely take away from that, because again, if you're gonna do subtlety, lay back on the thumpiness a little bit, like make your kicks a little less kicking. I don't know what the word would be, but just kind of lay back a bit, let the melodies do the work. If you're going to do a more laid back track like this, which this definitely is, no questions asked, like, just lay back a bit, like, learn some restraint, like, because definitely having some restraint on this song would have definitely served it wonders in the long run. And on top of that, the vocal runs around the 125 mark are a little bit questionable, just because the auto-tune on it sounds really cheap, and the way that Ouse delivered the vocals, the way that the auto-tune then manipulates it, does also sound a little bit iffy. So, like, it's not exactly great in that department either. But, like, again, while I do like just the melodic bass that the track set out for itself, just a few of the production decisions really made me scratch my head. The next track is called Trouble/Tonight, and I think is yet another case of this album's attempts at experimentation going a little bit off the deep end, because again, while I do like the counterpoint between these very nice catchy earworm vocals with the melancholy pianos, the beat on top of it is very, very odd, because it kind of sounds like a combination of emo rap and, like, I guess reggaeton would be the only thing that I can really draw upon as an influence, which obviously that cross-section of influences isn't one that you come across every day. Again, the vocals are alright, but they definitely do carry this portion of the song, and I think the switch to Icelandic, while seeming like a bit of a token gesture, does at least allow Ouse to show a bit of his kind of original flair, which I definitely welcome. I do think the switch to the second part of the song is very abrupt, because like the first part just cuts out and then some weird distortion and vinyl crackling effects, and then it's just the second part starts, which kind of like works as a very odd kind of jarring transition. And the artificially lowered auto-tune vocals in the first bit just sound super tacky, like the backing vocals did on Love Killer. They just sound so like just ugh, like just stop it please, like there was no need for this, it does not sound good. But then when the second actual beat part comes in, it just sounds as much as a low budget emo rap track I think as you can possibly get, like just the generic trap beat, the melodies, the vocals, like nothing about it stands out, and it's just done in a really kind of low budget grimy way, but not in that kind of endearing way, kind of like a John Paul would do it, where the kind of grittiness of the instrumental or the production helps it. In this case, it definitely does hinder it, I think. That said though, it does have some fairly nice vocal melodies, so I can give it that. But yeah, this track just seems like a bit of a mess. Like, it seems like it's trying to do too many things at once, and that seems to be the downfall of quite a few tracks here, is that being experimental is good, yes, but you don't want to overdo it. Like, you want to kind of have something that's normal and kind of alter it in a way, kind of like Dilated Eyes did, I suppose, in a way. But yeah, I think if this track shows anything, is that if you try to experiment too much, it can often backfire a little bit on you, which this track definitely suffers from. Track number 14 is called I Wish I Never Met You, featuring All Day, and it's one that I ended up quite liking, because the subtle guitar-backed beat with the more thumping drums I do think works quite well here. Like, the guitar may be a little bit too quiet in the mix, and so there's not really much melody to grasp onto, but I do think that the beat itself in isolation is still pretty good regardless of that. And to be fair, Ouse on this song just does his thing, really, like some nice catchy vocals, some decent harmonies, you know, he's just doing his thing and having fun doing it, and I'm very much up for that. I do think the vocals from the feature do slightly stunt the track's momentum, just because of how whispery and croaky they are, because they don't really seem to add much to the song beyond just being a feature, really. Like, I think the job of a feature on any song is to add to the vibe that a song has going, whereas this just kind of seems to stunt the momentum a little bit, which is a bit of a shame. And Ouse needs to take it easy with his producer tags. Like, I don't know how many there are, but I think it's like the flex tag that he uses on this song is an indication that he produced it, I think, if I remember that correctly. But there's at least like 6 or 7 of them on this song, so like, take it easy, my guy. Like, we know you produced it, alright? You don't have to tell us every 30 seconds. But, you know, despite my minor quibbles, I did quite enjoy this song, because it's just Ouse doing his thing, not trying to overdo it, not trying to blow our minds either, admittedly, but like, he's just trying to make a nice, enjoyable, chilled out song, and he does that fairly well.
Waited for a minute, it's my fault. I didn't wanna see you wanna know. You stole my heart and then you let me fall.
The penultimate track is Why Did You Tell Me That You Loved Me? And I absolutely, categorically, undeniably despised everything about this song. Like, the intro just sounds like a very generic emo rap intro, like clean guitar chords, Ouse singing over it. I was like, okay, here we go, this is just going to be another boring one, is it? But then the beat comes in, like the main one, and my god, it genuinely makes me want to rip my own ears off my head, because for starters, I have no idea what the vocals are. Like, these hideous, just high-pitched, distorted, auto-tuned vocals sound absolutely horrendous. And then you get onto the beat, which arguably is even worse, because they just really distorted, overblown, future-based keyboards, and the melodies, they just sound awful. And the drums on this are so massively overblown that they somehow managed to cut out every instrument in the mix at will whenever the kick drum hits. Like, whenever the kick drum hits, every single instrument in the mix pretty much just cuts out whenever it happens. Like, the production on this is absolutely awful. The clipping on it is just absolutely just ugh. I know some people have tried to make the excuse that this is experimental, but it just sounds like complete ass. It just sounds awful. Like, sonically, this is easily the worst thing here. Like, the production is absolutely awful just because of how overblown and distorted it is. The melodies aren't catchy. Nothing about it is good. The drums are way too overblown. The vocal breaks in between these, like, absolute audio spasms do absolutely nothing to help the song. And my god, enough with the beat switches, man. This track did not need to be any longer, and for some reason he decided to add an extra 40 seconds onto the end of it for literally no reason whatsoever. Stop it. Like, this track would have been absolutely horrendous as it is, and easily is the worst thing on this entire album, but just to have it extended even longer than it already had to be, it's just like a punch in the nads at this point. The final track is called Hanging Up and is an anomaly in the absolute best way. Like, I'm just going to say this right. Where was this? Where was it? I want more of it. Where was it? There's nothing like this on the whole album, and yet right at the last minute you just hit us with this. Like, okay, like, you can do that, can you? Where was it? Where was music of this quality throughout the whole of this album? Because it's absolutely incredible. Like, the combination of the pianos, the synths, and the vocals are absolutely incredible, especially when the vocal harmonies come in. They just add an extra layer of brilliance to this whole song. And the whole track itself has a really kind of odd, endearing, heartfelt, kind of oddly dramatic quality to it, which I absolutely love. Like, again, there was nothing in this whole album that could have possibly hinted at you being able to do something like this, but then you just pull out it at the last minute. Like, how, what? Huh? And if the track wasn't brilliant enough, the touches of strings that he adds in like near the end are done absolutely masterfully. Like, this track is produced perfectly, it sounds brilliant, it's catchy, it's endearing, it's warm, it's heartfelt, it's dramatic. It does absolutely everything correctly and is an absolutely incredible closer. Like, again, I have no idea where this was for the whole of this album, but please give me more of it.
I've suffered enough. I'm hanging up. I bled for
So, what did I think of Ouse's brand new album, Crying in Camo? Well, this album, in a word, is frustrating because there is so much potential here. Like, there were flashes of brilliance throughout the whole of this album, I would say, but rarely ever was it actually capitalised on. Like, there were tracks I enjoyed, yeah, but there wasn't really anything that really made me go, wow, this is great. Like, there were a few, like Dreams of You was definitely one, and the last track was definitely one. I mean, I don't want to say that the most musically ambitious tracks on this whole album were the intro and the outro, but I'm afraid that that is actually the case, because it seems like he can do the more grandiose stuff, saying like there's almost a similarity between some of Kodeka's more recent stuff, like the really grandiose epic side of emo rap that works very, very well, at least with him. So he shows that he can do stuff like that, but for the most part it's almost like he doesn't bother. Like, it's like, okay, you can do the more epic grandiose stuff that works very, very well, but then you just don't bother. So aside from that, you just get either emo rap that is so generic and boring that there's nothing worth pointing out about it, or more experimental tracks that are way too experimental and more often than not end up going off the rails and kind of sounding very odd and mishmash and sporadic and quite slapdash in their approach, which doesn't go over all too well, as you can probably guess. So like, yeah, this album is just frustrating. Like, there's a lot of parallels, I suppose, in a way, to Joji's Nectar, where there are a few really, really good tracks on it, but for the most part it just felt a bit meh, which is quite upsetting actually, because I know that Ouse can do great things, but again, it's almost like he just doesn't bother. So in terms of a score, I'm probably going to have to go decent 5, just based on everything that I've said. Although, that being said, although this was a requested review, I will definitely be looking out for what Ouse has in the future, because if this album is any indication, he can only go up from here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider liking and subscribing. It really mean a lot to me. This video in itself was kind of weirdly rewarding in a strange way, because I've never gone this in-depth of an album in this style, and that's mostly down, I think, to personal preference. I mean, I've touched on it at points, like with a few tracks on Not So Forensic, or maybe with the Little PPP review, but I've never really delved into an album of this length in this style and kind of really dissected it and being able to see what makes it tick or not, I suppose. So that was kind of a lot very rewarding in this case, I think. So I hope it made for a good review or a good watching experience. Again, there should be more reviews coming down the pipeline very, very soon. I think the think pieces and stuff like that are a little bit dry. There are definitely more episodes of the Not So Forensic Record Society coming down the pipeline, but I think reviews are definitely the thing that I'm focusing on at the moment. So just look out for more of those, and until next time, I'll see you all later.